Welcome to Inquiry into Self. So, an ego is a bunch of thoughts that create the sense that we're separate and vulnerable. So, before there's an ego, there's this interplay of energies where we may move towards something or away from something. We may cry or yell, but it's all just a spontaneous interaction as these energies flow in and out through us or through this body mind. And then a moment comes when, this mind is trying to find ways to work in the world, and it lands upon predicting, attaching, rejecting, with a sense that this little part here is separate. That this little part needs to be in conflict in order to get what it wants against what others want. It feels itself to be vulnerable, which as a little separate part it is. It's a little separate part. It's transient. So where does that dividing line happen? And then how do these thoughts arise? Well, first of all, the dividing lines are actually quite arbitrary. If we were an ant, I'm sure the dividing lines between what is this and what is that would be very different, just as we looked around the world. Or let's say we were something that mostly just smells, doesn't even see. Well, again, the dividing lines would be very different. We seem to make dividing lines based upon what's easy for us to pull apart. So we might take a suitcase, and the zipper is part of the suitcase, but the contents inside the suitcase are not, because we can pull them out. So this is just how our mind starts dividing things up. And then coming up with the me against the rest. How in the world do we come up with that? We're just flowing. There's an arising energy that goes towards and away. There's an arising energy that feels strong or feels quiet, feels diminished, feels big. And it just kind of cycles through all these things. But then there's an attachment. I want to feel big. I don't want to feel diminished. Or I want whatever. We come up with all these things. And then we start trying to plan and predict, attach and reject. And we create all these thoughts that make us think that there's some origination right here, that there's some wisdom separate from all the rest of the wisdom, that there's some intelligence right here separate from all the rest of the intelligence, rather than this interplay. I actually remember when that happened for me. I was going with my parents to my friend's apartment. They live right near us in the same building. And we went over there. I was probably around 2 years old, actually. And I went to go to play with the little girl in the other room. And my parents said, no, we're here for just a short time. Stay here. So, we started to play there, and I guess it was the living room. And after a few minutes, I had this thought. We've been here long enough that there was time to go to the other room and get the toys. that thought created this idea of an alternate reality that could have happened. And I believed that that alternate reality would have been better. So I concluded that I had to do more planning, do more manipulating, because my parents were not going to always do what I thought was in my best interest. So in that moment, I felt the energy of the situation, created an alternate reality that I preferred, and decided that I could manipulate things in the future by predicting the alternate reality that I would prefer and by trying to manage and manipulate events and people. So in that moment, I created a bunch of thoughts. I established a pattern of thinking, and I don't know how strong that pattern of thinking was at that point, because I don't have a lot of memories beyond that till, just a couple of years thereafter. But eventually it became quite a habit. Quite a habit to project the reality that I wanted, and quite a habit to try to manipulate life to get that. And we all pick, what is important to us? What are we going to manipulate to get? Some of us want to make sure that nobody ever runs over us. Some of us want to make sure that other people always like us. Some of us want to make sure that there's no confusion, that there's order. Whatever it is that we've attached to, and from time to time we attach to any of those things, right? Then we decide all the different strategies, all the thoughts, all the analysis, all the ways we're going to decide cause and effect. And we choose those cause and effects so that they can fit into our strategizing. It's an amazing amount of cause and effect identifying all the time. Well, that causes that. That causes that. That causes that. So manipulate these causes to get those effects. Manipulate those causes to get these effects. I mean, we're constantly analyzing that. And the funny thing is, the accuracy is actually not as good as we think. How many times has life gone a different way than we thought, and it turned out better? That has happened to me so many times. I went to a different graduate school than I thought I was going to go to, and it turned out to be better. My first marriage lasted shorter than I thought it was going to, and it turned out better in my life. Jobs ended sooner than I thought they were going to end, and it turned out better in my life. Over and over and over. So mistakes happened, but there were only a few consequences. I got to learn and prevent something that would have seemed like a much bigger mistake. Over and over and over. So this idea that we have of how things should be is not that accurate. And the causes and effects. I mean, how often have I totally misunderstood someone's motivation? That it could be here's an example, right? You come into a house and you trip over something, and now you're blaming, right? Who put that something there? Who put that? It could be, a doorstop or something. Who put that doorstop there? And then you find out, well, somebody else tripped and fell and dropped something. Nobody put it there. It fell there. Or somebody was cleaning, moved it out of the way, forgot to move it back. Or it turns out it's a turtle. It crawled its own self there. Well, probably not that. But, there's so many causes and effects, and we turn out to not know. We really don't know. So-and-so was late for work. We think it was because they didn't care. No. it was because they had a flat tire, or, what, or actually a whole big thing happened. They were actually going to be 4 hours late, and they worked really hard, and they were only 15 minutes late. We don't know all the causes and effects. So the amount of thinking our brains do and assuming that we know is huge. We don't know. So when we relax into the fact that we don't know, then it's more of the spontaneous game. Spontaneous of what's the wisdom showing up as right now. I thought I was walking this direction, but no, I feel the wisdom moving in this direction. I saw a little cat I want to pet, or the wisdom is moving me. I feel something going on in my leg, I'm going to walk a different direction. The wisdom is the spontaneous thing calling us constantly. So the ego is the thing that's trying to control, predict, plan, attach, reject. And it doesn't actually have any existence. We're actually going to move towards in a way where actually, you can try to change what you're doing, that somehow the wisdom moves us anyway, right? We might try to sell our house. It doesn't sell, and then it turns out it's going to be rented to so-and-so or whatever. We can try to, but the wisdom is moving. And then we're going to have a story about it. We're going to create the whys and the wherefores, which should have happened. But we really don't know. Energetically, when my marriage ended, it ended. I did all this manipulating to try to make it last. It ended. There was nothing I could do. And then the stories came, the stories about why it ended, blaming here, blaming there. But with each new understanding of where my life direction was, where my husband's direction was going, it was just clear. Of course it was ending. That none of the reasons I came up with were right. Of course it was ending. So all of our reasons, they're just a bunch of thoughts and explanations. That's all that we assemble to create what we think is an ego. Fundamentally, we're moved by this wisdom. Fundamentally, the wisdom pulls towards itself every experience. And yes, it will pull towards itself experiences of limitation. It will pull towards itself experiences of vulnerability. The wisdom has a grace in every experience. So the wisdom is bringing us in and bringing us out, growing us and shrinking us, growing us and shrinking us. And then we get comfortable or uncomfortable because we've attached. But more and more, we'll find a fluidity that is less and less preferring and more curious. There's fewer and fewer rules and more wonder. We tend to think, oh, I've arrived because I've become blank. What is it that you think you should be? More happy, or manifesting more, or more intelligent, more planned in your life, or whatever it is. more loving, whatever it is. But the wisdom is always bringing us in and out of all the experiences. None of those are actual, permanent indicators of anything. Really, the wisdom is bringing us in and out of all the experiences. The letting go of these ideas that I have to be this, or I have to be that. The letting go of the evaluator seems to happen as this flexibility seems to happen and the extra thoughts seem to decrease. Those extra thoughts of planning and attaching seems to decrease, and the fluidity seems to increase. That's how it seems to go. But even that is not a rule. That is not a rule. The mental rules are just that. They exist in the mind. The mental rules. Every moment we can look and see, am I attaching? Am I trying to manipulate? Or is this just flowing with the wisdom? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We are the wisdom, whichever way we're going, right? But the experience of the vast wisdom does deepen as the habit of identifying with the manipulator decreases. So the little girl that I was, she thought she'd be happier if she could make sure that when she got into a space, she could do what she wanted. That's what she thought. That was what she thought was going to make her happy. Later on, she found out when she got forced to hang out with the adults, it was pretty fun listening to their conversations. So she didn't know what she wanted. No. I would say 99% of the time I don't know what I want. What shows up is better than what I wanted. So those thoughts that project, this is what I'm going to want, they're thoughts that pass in and out. And the deeper wisdom orchestrates life. So anytime that you're noticing that it feels like there's two, right? There's what's happening and then there's what I want to happen. Well, all that what I want to happen is just a bunch of thoughts, right? Now, of course, this aliveness that we are, yes, it's very participative. So it's going to move towards what the next moment is building. It's going to move towards what the next moment is creating. But in a way that includes this moment. Just like an apple tree doesn't get mad that it made flowers. What? I made flowers. I was supposed to make apples. No, of course. The apple tree is not upset that it made flowers. Flowers are the precursor to the apples. Or it's not upset that all the flowers fell off. No. Falling off flowers are precursor to apples. This moment is the precursor to the next moment. And if we're feeling a desire for something new arising, this moment is the precursor to that new thing that is arising. This moment can be embraced. This moment is the perfect precursor for all the next moments. This moment is actually closer to whatever's going to happen in the next moments than any thought that we have. If we want to be most in tune to what's going to happen 5 minutes from now, 5 years from now, this moment is closer to any of those things than any thought that we can have. So just by kind of deconstructing what those mental habits are, we can gain some space and humor around them. Yeah, that's what the brain does until it doesn't. And that is part of the interplay of the wisdom. That's what the brain does. And it's part of the interplay of the wisdom. So I just invite you to notice what the brain is doing, notice what its effects are, and notice the wisdom that persists through every moment. And enjoy.